And let me make you a co-host. Or I'll make you a host in just a moment so you can share screen and stuff.
Okay.
Somebody's got some neat Jeeps.
No, thank you.
All right, it is 7:03. We'll officially call our meeting to order. Normally we do a roll call, but we can kind of see everybody here on the screen. So thank you all for joining us. And I want to jump right into the program because I am thrilled to have Jonathan Davis with us this evening. Jonathan, his call sign's KM4UOB, Uniform Oscar Bravo. And I asked Jonathan here because he is the senior network engineer for the city of Greensboro. So he has the same kind of day job that Aaron does. But in watching Aaron and a lot of the people that we go to Cisco Live with talk about things that they're into outside of their day jobs, I realized many of them are ham radio operators. And so I wondered why amateur radio seems to be interesting to people who are in the computer networking field. And even recently, Jonathan posted in one of his social network posts that he studies antenna radiation patterns for fun. And I said, we might be onto something here. So I've asked Jonathan to come talk to us about how amateur radio actually enhances his career, which is in computer networking. Jonathan, the floor is yours, and let me make you the host.
All right, thank you. All right, let's see.
Pardon me.
Well, if it will share, there we go. Screen sharing failed to start. I literally just tested this earlier. Let me try one thing real quick.
We've found doing this month after month that is the nature of these meetings. There's always some kind of technical difficulty. So we're patient. There you go.
All right, there we go. All right. Okay, so I will, I've kind of got a lot to maybe give you something to think about, but please, let's make this as much of a conversation as possible. If I start moving too fast, don't be afraid to jump in and ask questions. I'm more than happy to kind of go deeper into whatever subject that we happen to be on. As Renee said, I'm KM4UOB. I am only a technician. I spend most of my time in either C4FM or D-Star. I've got a FT2DR and an FT1DR. I would probably sell the FT2DR, but I would feel bad for whoever got it. I also have a 880 and an ID51 for the D-Star side. And then funny enough, for an HT, my favorite HT is a little Yaesu VX2, which if anybody knows what that is, it's a tiny little analog radio. I think it only puts out 3 watts max. It's as simple as it comes. You have to program it, on a computer. There's simply no way of, there's not enough buttons on it to actually do anything useful. But every time I talk on it, people are like, "What are you on? That sounds amazing." This tiny little radio. And I have carried that thing to many mountains and hit local repeaters. I think my longest one was 96 miles at half a watt on a little roll-up J-pole, suspended up in the tree with that thing. So it's a fun little radio. And then I've got a Kenwood TS690S for the HF, but to be perfectly honest, it almost never gets turned on. On the IT side, I spend most of my time in wireless. So I'm a certified wireless network expert number 366. That is a roll-up certification that basically you take a bunch of exams and then you do a board. You go before a board to actually you have to present. You have to have various articles that have been published and things along those lines, and then you submit an application packet, and at some point they decide whether or not you're worthy. And about, I think about 20 years, we've got about 425 people who've completed that around the world. So it was a great experience for me. I'm a certified trainer. Most recently, that same organization, CertiTrack, has built an IoT connectivity professional or IoT connectivity. Eventually, it will be an expert level cert, but we're working up to it, and I'm actually helping to build those certifications. But as part of that, I've also acquired many of them. I'm Ekahau Master number 42, and you'll actually see Ekahau in a bit. It's a software package that we use for designing wireless networks. I've got 21 years in IT and 13 years in wireless and Wi-Fi. So we'll talk quickly about what defines a wireless technology. And I think what you guys are going to see is that really quickly, there's a lot of overlap that takes place between wireless and ham radio. And I think that's ultimately the question is, you know, why are IT and technical people interested in ham radio? And I think you'll kind of start to see that the way a lot of this overlaps. I'll take a real quick moment to talk about Wi-Fi and wireless and what the difference is there when we're talking about that from an IT perspective. We'll talk through some emerging wireless IoT technologies that are pretty cool. And then I'll really drill down into, all right, ham radio versus Wi-Fi and how are they similar? And then if you guys are interested and there's time and I haven't talked too much, we'll look at some of the tools of the trade that I think you might like. So, and feel free to unmute and answer this question. When we talk about a wireless technology and really technology, we can put a lot of words there, standard, communication standard, right? So if we think about C4FM or particular standard, what defines that, right? In ham radios, you know, we have frequency coordinators, right? And what kind of information do we consider when we think about frequency coordination and that type of thing? Does anybody want to throw anything out?
Well, frequency, I don't know if am I muted? I guess I am muted.
I can hear you. No, you're great. Oh, you were. Now you're muted.
You're muted now.
There you go.
There you go.
I'm kind of new to technology. I've only been doing this for 57 years. Someday I'll learn how to do this. You know, I was just thinking the difference really is in spectrum. What you mentioned suggests VHF, UHF. If you get down into the HF spectrum, the medium wave and the long wave, it's pretty fast and loose. There's not a lot of specs there. In fact, there's very little even in terms of bandwidth and stuff, what you can actually practically do. They talk about modulation schemes rather than bandwidth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start there actually. So, you know, operating band or frequency, right? Channel width and spacing. So if we look at this from an IT perspective, you know, we generally deal with much wider channels. So 2 megahertz channel width on a 5 megahertz spacing is really common. In Wi-Fi, we deal with a 20 megahertz channel, right? And depending upon if it's in the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz band, that may be on a 5 megahertz spacing or a 20 megahertz spacing, which is the reason that you have overlapping channels in 2.4. We then have kind of gone further than that, and we've done something called channel bonding, where now we're actually bonding multiple 20 megahertz channels together, and you can see you can see 20, 40, 80, 100, and even 160 megahertz channel widths, which when you think about that is just really incredible. You mentioned modulation and bandwidth; those are both great examples. Also, especially when it comes into IT, but we also see this a little bit in C4FM, I know, and some others as well, error correction, right? So if anybody does C4FM, you know, there's the really high quality voice, and then there's the second mode where you're kind of further away from the repeater, where it starts sending error correction to ensure that you actually get the data there. And then topologies on you know, way of thinking about that from a ham perspective is, are you just simply calling local stations, or are you using a repeater, right? So this is very similar to, either a point-to-point communication or using an access point is one way of thinking about it. And then we also have topologies like mesh, which would be, allowing multiple radios to kind of to communicate and pass data along to other radios. So that's kind of when we think about this from an IT perspective, this gets rolled up into all of the specs, and I've got a kind of a cheat sheet later. I'll show you kind of what this looks like. It's something I built for a class I had to teach. So Wi-Fi is a wireless technology, but wireless does not equal Wi-Fi in IT, and this is a thing that a lot of people kind of get confused on. Wi-Fi is a standard created by the Wi-Fi Alliance. And the Wi-Fi Alliance basically certifies clients to meet certain requirements and to pass certain tests. Maybe that has to do with the whether or not they roam between access points, or it can be kind of a lot of there are a lot of standards, security standards. For example, I have a good friend who actually is the security chair for the Wi-Fi Alliance. And you might have heard of WPA, WPA2, now there's WPA3. He's actually the chair of that board. So they set that security standard that is used for wireless. And let's see if I can. Renee, it's popping up, but for some reason I can't get over there. Someone's trying to get in. I don't know if you can admit or not.
I will try.
For some reason, my mouse just is suddenly, oh, nope. Well, so what that looks like is the Wi-Fi Alliance, you've started seeing these new terms, probably Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6. That's a Wi-Fi Alliance term. And it actually refers to an IEEE standard. The great thing about IEEE standards are once they've reached a certain age, you can download the standard. You can look at, in this case, the 802.11ax roll-up standard, all, I don't know, 1,100 pages of it or whatever it is. You can actually download that. You can read through it and you can see exactly what's in that IEEE standards document. Now, it may cover things that aren't actually used in Wi-Fi. That no one has implemented and used, but it at least spells out everything. And from my perspective as an engineer, I love this, because if I need to understand how does a client decide whether or not it can talk on the medium, I can go look it up and I can read it exactly the way it is in the standard, and then I can compare what I'm seeing clients actually do against the standard to see, are they actually meeting the standard? So it's a little confusing right now, because you have the Wi-Fi Alliance Wi-Fi 6, which refers to 802.11ax, which is a standard, and that also has another name assigned by the IEEE, which is HE, high efficiency. So you can actually see HE, or high efficiency, 802.11ax, and Wi-Fi 6, and they all describe exactly the same thing. So that's, it's worth knowing, I think, but it can be a little confusing. But recognizing that those are all the same is useful. Wi-Fi 5, 802.11ac. You'll see 802.11ac Wave 2, and you'll also see VHT, very high throughput. That all means exactly the same, because those all describe the exact same specs for how do we access the physical medium, and how do we carry on a conversation and ensure that conversation's held in an effective manner. When we look outside of Wi-Fi, and it may also include other technologies. So 802.15.4 is another IEEE standard. I'm sure you could guess from the numbers. That is the standard that gets used for a lot of the IoT wireless networks, and I listed many of them there: Zigbee and Z-Wave. I'm sorry, Z-Wave doesn't, but Zigbee does, Thread does, 6LoWPAN does. So a lot of those wireless networking topologies kind of use that same 802.15.4 standard. And then the last couple there are interesting. 802.11 AD is a point-to-point standard. It's good out to about 800 meters, so a fairly good distance. It'll pass a gigabit per second, so it's high throughput, and it uses the 60 gigahertz band, which is way up there, right? And the one problem with that is 60 gigahertz happens to align with the resonant frequency of, I believe it's hydrogen. I'm almost certain it's hydrogen. It'd either be hydrogen or oxygen. I'm almost certain it's hydrogen because it's very sensitive to rain fade. But that's an interesting one. And then CBRS we'll talk about in a bit, which is Citizens Broadband Radio Service. And is essentially how you can run your own private LTE network. You know, you can replace Verizon if you want. Yeah, well, actually, so a few emerging technologies. Of course, IoT is a big one on that huge list of stuff. And I'll actually show you a little bit more about this very quickly shortly. Thread is a big one right now. You're going to see a lot of stuff. If you're interested at all in home automation, you're going to see Thread. If you're thinking about an IoT technology to learn more about, learn Thread. One is because there's a lot of market movement behind it. So a lot of your manufacturers of devices that support IoT technologies became members of a group called the Connected Home Project, I believe is the correct term for it. Apple kind of started that with Google and Samsung, and actually competing technologies, Zigbee is a board member now. And so Thread is built on 6LoWPAN, which is really just an addressing scheme. It's kind of an adaptation layer. And then that's ultimately built on 802.15.4. So again, it's all very open standard. And I would imagine in the next 3 to 5 years, you're not going to be able to buy an IoT type device that doesn't support Thread. That is going to be the standard, just like Wi-Fi is for computer wireless networking. BLE is another interesting one. There is a hospital that I'm aware of. The initials are VA, and they are using BLE. A great example, they actually are using it for location tracking. So all employees and all patients have a badge, and that badge has a BLE tag in it. And through location tracking, they can tell when an employee is approaching a door, if they can automate, does that door automatically unlock for that employee because there's no one else around it? Or if there are patients around that shouldn't leave that area, that door will stay locked, and the employee actually has to go up and manually badge and manually open the door. So that's a good example of one way that BLE is being used in kind of an enterprise industrial space. And there's quite a bit of interesting things that can happen there. That started as an IEEE standard for the geeks in the room, but that standard is no more. It doesn't exist any longer. It was retired, and that was all moved under the the Bluetooth SIG, or special interest group. And then Citizens Band Radio Service, which is private LTE and 5G. It operates in 3.5 gigahertz band. If there are any ex-Navy guys specifically, you may recognize that. It's actually the band that, one of the bands that the aircraft carriers use for radar. And this was a very long process of getting the FCC and the branches to kind of allow use of that band. But what we found is that was actually very, that in the majority of the US, the entire band can be used like 92% of the time. And we have something called Spectrum Access and Allocation systems, SAS systems, which ensure that if an aircraft carrier is at dock or in the area, anywhere that could potentially cause interference with that aircraft carrier, the frequencies that that aircraft carrier could use cannot be used during that time period. But it still leaves I think it's about 70 megahertz total that will never be touched, that will always be available. And so that's a neat technology and kind of an additional capability. There are, I'm wrong. I said that it requires a CPI or Certified Professional Installer license. I went back and double checked on that. There are low power indoor only devices that do not require that CPI. So that's something that you can literally play with, and any modern device that supports band 48 is what they call it. And CBRS is literally just a descriptor of the band. Everything else is LTE or 3GPP 5G. So any device that supports band 48, which is any of the last any smart iPhone from the last 3 years, or any of the kind of top end Samsungs, and a bunch of other devices, all already supported and will continue to support it. And so that's a way that people can literally run their own mobile service now. I'm looking at a particular project on this right now. It's an outdoor project. We will be able to put out 4 watts on a radio tower at a fire station, and that will give us about a 5-mile diameter of coverage. Radius of coverage, excuse me, that we'll be able to provide our own LTE coverage off that single access point. So, so this is something, it's a bit of an eye chart, but I wanted to kind of show you that a lot of these technologies, they use or reuse the exact same thing. In this certification that we've built, we had a lot of Wi-Fi people go, I spent years and years and years learning one protocol, and now you in a 4-day boot camp want to teach me 10 protocols. And what I use this to explain to them, and what I think you guys will grasp in this, is once you understand the theory of RF and kind of how how RF works and then how we modulate data, once you understand those basics, it really is kind of a copy paste exercise, right? Very common, you'll see that we have very consistent channel width and spacing. There's only so many bands that this stuff can get used on. Modulation, is it binary phase shift keying, which is basically on off? Is it QPSK or quadrature phase shift keying? Chirp spread spectrum for LoRaWAN. That's one worth reading up on just because it's cool. They can decode data like 20 dB below the noise floor. Gaussian frequency shift keying for BLE. So a lot of this is just it just kind of repeats itself. It's like a song that gets stuck in your head. It just kind of keeps repeating, right? And so a lot of these technologies, you guys already understand, so much of the basics of these technologies, and then beginning to learn some of the other details is pretty easy and pretty straightforward. So that's really the reason I threw that in there. There won't be an exam on this later. At the bottom, subnetwork.me, by the way, that's, if you guys are interested, I've got a blog there, and you can find more ways of contacting me there. I didn't really put a contact sheet in, I just realized. So let's talk about ham radio versus Wi-Fi. On ham radio, we have a repeater, and in many ways, an access point operates the same way. So generally, when we think about a repeater, we're talking about a radio that is a little higher elevation, much better receive sensitivity, right? Maybe some better filtering, that can hear much better than any client that's going to connect to it, right? And all it's doing is it's receiving that data, and then it's retransmitting that data on a different frequency at a higher power. Well, access points are kind of the same thing. They definitely are, they're generally mounted to the ceiling, so they're a little bit higher than everything else and have a little bit better view of everybody. They definitely have, a good access point has better receive sensitivity. definitely has better filtering, and is therefore able to decode data much better, and then generally can output at a much higher power. If you think about a standard laptop, most laptops, the radio that's in them will not output more than 100 milliwatts, even though we can in almost all channels output a watt, right? So it's actually the access point can output a lot more power. Now the reality is just like if you and I were talking, I was using a bullhorn and you were using your natural voice. At some point, as we move away from each other, we're going to get to a situation where you can still hear me perfectly clear and I can't hear anything you're saying. And so that same thing happens. A lot of people make the mistake of getting into their home access point and turning the power way up. Well, that doesn't exactly work. But if we can put out, say, 3 dB more than the client, there's a really good chance that the client can hear us as well as we can hear them. So very similar capabilities. If we think about net control and a controlled ham net, as far as dictating traffic flow and dictating what comes next and who talks and all of that, an access point kind of does the same thing. We have station IDs and Wi-Fi. We have the same thing. We have MAC addresses, and those may be used as I'm the transmitter, or if we think about this as Jim Bob is telling me something to pass on to Betsy Lou to pass on to somebody else. Well, when he's telling me, he's the transmitter, I'm the receiver, but he's also the source, and the fourth person down the chain is the destination. So there's different, those station IDs or MAC addresses are actually used for in different ways depending upon where traffic is going and how it's flowing, but it's much like a station ID. Of course, we have HT mobile or base stations, and in Wi-Fi we have wireless clients or supplicants. We kind of we use both of those terms, and just like, as I'm sure you guys are aware, you probably have a couple people that get on your repeaters, and their radio sounds like it was probably left out in the rain a few too many times, and it's probably connected to an antenna that's nothing more than a bent coat hanger, right? And in the same way, there are some wireless supplicants that every time they get on Wi-Fi, they make a mess of things. They have to retransmit the same data multiple times because the quality of that client or that supplicant isn't very good. So there is something to be said for ensuring that you've got the best drivers and that whatever device you have actually has a decent wireless NIC as part of it. Ham radio, we often say copy or copy that, just to say, hey, I understood everything you said clearly, right? In Wi-Fi, it's an acknowledgement or an ACK. Everything that is sent unicast, and actually I've got another sheet on this, basically is, so anything that's sent from one to another, not a broadcast that's sent out to everybody, has to be acknowledged. Or the sending station assumes you didn't hear me. And then we have a couple of things in Wi-Fi that we don't have in ham radio, right? We have authentication, authorization, and accounting. We call it AAA. This is security. So this says, who are you, and am I going to allow you to be on this repeater because of who you are? Not only that, but am I going to allow you to listen or only transmit or only listen? And not only that, but I'm going to log the fact that you were connected and you transmitted and maybe even what you transmitted. So that's kind of that authentication, authorization, and accounting. It's not really something we have in ham radio, but it's very big in Wi-Fi. And then roaming. I think not really in ham radio, but if you think about an aircraft, right, as it takes off, right, it transitions from ground control to air control, and then as it will move, as it moves across the country, it hops, air traffic control towers. Our wireless clients will do the same thing. Whereas from ham radio perspective, often we will fade out on one repeater and we will dial up the next one and check to see if we're hitting it again. Nothing like that happens in Wi-Fi. It's much more controlled, and there's kind of a more standardized handoff. And so, and then maybe kind of digging in just a little bit more on that wireless and the net control. This is something I think a lot of people don't get about all wireless technologies. And that is that, number one, as I said, every Wi-Fi unicast transmission has to be acknowledged. There's actually a timing, a little timer. So if I finish speaking, I know that in our world, it would be X number of seconds later, whoever I'm speaking to is going to say "ack" or copy, you know. And if they don't say that in that time period, then I know they didn't understand. There was something else that took place, right? Because just like in you know, really, well, just like on a repeater, if two people talk at the exact same time, the reality is you're not going to understand both of them. And more often than not, you're not going to understand either of them. We can't listen when we're transmitting, and the same thing happens in Wi-Fi. And so in Wi-Fi, there are all these custom timers that are kind of, or not custom, but standardized timers that are built in that suggest things like, you know, when someone finishes transmitting, you have to wait for that window and then the acknowledgement and then another window before anyone else can transmit, right? We do that somewhat in conversations. We kind of do that naturally. Someone will finish speaking and there's a natural pause that takes place in our conversations before we respond, because if we respond too fast, it's rude. So there's kind of a natural flow of that takes place anyways, but in Wi-Fi, it's all very, very specific timings. And then there's an assumption that if you don't acknowledge, you didn't get it, and I'm going to retransmit that for you. So in a really busy wireless network, that can become a problem, because obviously it's much easier for people to talk over each other. It's much easier for stations to cause interference. And then every time that happens, I have to retransmit, and that's essentially airtime, or the amount of data I can get through there significantly goes down. And then tools of the trade. Let me stop there. I've gone long. I'm sorry, Renee.
No problem.
How are you guys? Are you guys? Do you want me to keep going? Do you have questions? What's the thoughts?
I'd really like you to keep going. I find it pretty fascinating, really, and it's all a lot of new ground here, so it's pretty interesting. One quick question for you, just so I understand it, is the transmissions in each direction on the same channel or frequency?
It is. So right now, well, with the latest standard, there's a little bit of playing. So Wi-Fi and well, all these technologies except for CBRS, that's the outlier, are all time division multiplexing. So it's you transmit, then I transmit. CBRS is time and frequency, so that does split things up. And then the next standard, which will be out, which is, I think it's 5 or 6 years out at least before it will actually become an official standard, which I believe will be 802.11b. I believe is the working group that's working on that. Will actually be frequency division. So it will actually listen on one frequency and transmit on a different one. But right now, everything happens on all transmissions, and you transmit and receive on the same channel. Any other questions?
Jonathan, I'm going to try reclaiming the host real quick. If it cuts off your screen sharing, we'll get that turned back on, because I think
fine.
Everybody's interested in what you're about to show.
Okay.
So let me see. Okay, we should still be good. If there's somebody in the waiting room, I'll get them in. And the funny thing is, I've seen what Jonathan's showing you here on the screen before, because when these guys all get together for Cisco Live, they like to run these tools on the Wi-Fi networks at the hotel that we're in, and at the convention center, and at Universal Studios. So
yeah,
these are
absolutely.
fun.
All right, so I'm going to share a different application now. Let's see. Share. Oh, host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Yep, let me give it back to you.
Okay, sorry about that. So I got 3 tools to run you through. The first 2 are kind of interlinked. There we go. All right. So share, and I want to go ahead and start select it. So if we think about this from the perspective of my day job, I do a lot of work where, especially stuff for like new buildings, right? And the problem with a new building is it doesn't exist in reality. And so it's really hard to get measurements and make accurate predictions on where access points should be placed. But the other thing is when you're building a new building, you want to be able to run all your network cable before the ceiling grid is laid in, right? You want all of that to be able to, you want to know where conduit needs to be placed and et cetera, et cetera. So so what we do is we create what's called a predictive design. In this particular case, this is just a set of floor plans that gets commonly used for exams and things along those lines. It's just an example. But what I did on this floor plan was I went in and I did a couple things. One, this little dotted line, if you can see that clearly along the edge, is basically I'm telling it, this is the area I care about. Don't try to run physics on what the RF is doing out here. I don't care. It's a little bit CPU processor intensive, and so I kind of draw that boundary to make things move a little faster for me. And then the next thing I do is I begin drawing over a set of CAD drawings, things like walls and doorways and elevators and stairwells and all of that. And I begin assigning dB loss value. Now you see the 17 dB that's everywhere? That's a bug. I don't know why it's showing that. That doesn't mean anything in this world. So you'll just have to excuse that. But if I do click on, so I'll click on this wall, for example, and then what we see pop up here at the top is it clearly says that is currently assigned a value of 3 dB of loss because because I've set it as drywall. And what that generally means is if I were to go out here in the open and I were set a transmitter and a receiver, say 10 feet apart is a good example, and I were to take a measurement between, what is the signal strength I'm seeing there, and then I were to then put the transmitter inside the room and the receiver outside of the room, but they're still the same distance apart, and I take that measurement, I will see about, if I'm looking straight through the wall, I will see about 3 dB of loss. And that's a pretty common number for just a standard sheetrock wall with, say, 1/2 inch or 5/8 sheetrock, on two sides of a stud wall. Other things in buildings like elevators, for example, that is actually 17 dBm. That is the one point where it does actually matter, because elevators, obviously, it's always concrete and cinder block. You've got metal boxes, there and a lot of metal through there. So there's a whole lot of loss that's taking place there. Stairwells, again, cinder block, because they're always built to withstand tornadoes. So there's a little bit of kind of building mechanics that you have to learn through this process to understand how buildings are built and what common wall materials are, and then it just takes a lot of trial and error of measuring RF losses in walls and doors. And is it a fire rated door? What's the loss versus a solid wood door versus a metal door versus, there's lots of different, well, just to give you an idea, I mean, this, there's a huge list of this stuff in here, and this isn't even the full list. This is an old list. So we build all of this. We literally draw all of these lines and all of these, everywhere. We model everything. You'll notice all these doors. There's really nothing there. We actually model all doors closed because we know that RF has to work when the door is closed, right? If it works perfectly fine with the door open and then you close the door and it doesn't work, well, it doesn't work, right? So we always model doors closed. And then once we do this, we begin placing access points. And the software actually models the RF coverage based on power output. So you'll notice over here on the left side, each access point has 2 radios in it. It has a 2.4 gigahertz radio and a 5 gig radio. So right now I'm running this, and again, this is certainly not the way I would design it, but right now I'm running this at 25 milliwatt output power on the 2.4 gigahertz radio, and 50 milliwatts on the 5 gig radio. 50 milliwatts is about right. Really on 2.4, I would generally drop that down to probably 6.5 or at most 12 milliwatts. In Wi-Fi, we work back and forth between milliwatts and dB a lot. And so excuse me if I jump back and forth, but everything is dBm or dB above milliwatts or just flat milliwatts. So we place access points, and then the software, I'll actually turn one of these on. By selecting it, you can actually see that it draws us a predicted coverage area for that. And it allows us to begin seeing, how, as we move these around, what kind of coverage does that particular device create. So if I move this up, for example, up in this hallway, you can begin seeing it really starts pushing signal down this hall, and it's not real time, but it's fairly quick. The redraw on this is not bad at all. And as I select a different access point, well, then that one then updates. So that ultimately what we're looking for is we're looking for, coverage across, the whole building that meets a certain requirement. In this case, it's better than neg 65. So in this case, we are talking about dBm, so neg 65 dBm. And so this is what in this particular case, this is what like a mobile device would see. And then this is what a laptop or something with better antennas would actually see. So you actually get a little better coverage there. And that's on the 5 gig. And then if we look at 2.4, we'll go back to mobile, you actually see it's not as good. And that's just because some of these actually have radios turned off. So that's kind of modeling. That's how we do what we call predictive design. And based on that, we can make decisions on, do we need to add more APs, where they need to be placed, and we can then provide a cabling. We can provide a diagram to an electrical engineer so that he can do all the cabling maps and ensure that all of our network cables installed as the building's built. Any questions there? Hey, Aaron. Good to see you. All right. The next thing we do a lot of is something, this same software, I actually have what's called a sidekick. It is a piece of hardware that has a spectrum analysis chipset and 2 radios, 2 wireless NICs in it. And it then provides us a real-time view of what's happening in that RF space as it's taking place. Now I just gave that power again. Hopefully that is not going to disconnect. Update. Oh, I didn't like that. Oh, disconnect. I'm going to reconnect. There we go. Oh, come on. All right, let me just full power, and maybe if I keep it off power, it will be showing connected. Why is this not? Do an intentional disconnect and reconnect. Let me ask this. All right, there we go. Let me ask this. Are you guys able to see frequency monitor here? I don't know. Let me, I'm not certain that you guys can. Here we go. I think I do have to share that. Even though it's the same app, I think I have to share that.
There it is.
Okay. All right. So what we see here, this is actually a really cool device. So this is the 5 gigahertz band. So from channel 36 all the way up to channel 165. And it's scanning in 33 kilohertz chunks because even though we talk on a 20 megahertz channel in Wi-Fi, that actually gets subdivided into subcarriers, which are 133.5 kilohertz wide, I think is what it is. And so this is actually scanning even more narrow at 33 kilohertz wide, and it scans the entire band. I think it's 30 times a second, so it's very fast. What you'll notice here is this is kind of my primary access point. This is what everything's connecting on, and you'll see occasionally things kind of pop up there. So it's a 80 megahertz channel, which really means it's bonded. It's 4 bonded 20 megahertz channels. And you'll see a lot of conversation right now is happening only on that first channel. And the reason for that is the access point beacons, or it tells everyone, just like a repeater identifies itself, the access point identifies itself once every 100 milliseconds, or we'll call it 10 times a second. So you see that traffic. But there are some clients that if they're only passing a small amount of data, they don't need to expend the power required to transmit across a 40 or a 80 megahertz channel. So they'll only talk on the 20. But you see occasionally we kind of get the full channel update. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to run a speed test app on my iPhone that's connected to this. And you're going to see a couple things. What you're first going to see is you're going to see that 20 megahertz channel light up, because the initial kind of conversation has to take place there, because not every device is capable of listening to 80 megahertz. So everybody listens to that first 20 megahertz channel, and what it's going to say to everybody is, I'm going to be sending data, and it's going to take me this long to send that data, and it's going to be across all 80 megahertz. And once it does that, it's going to get a response back from the access point, and then it's going to start that data flow. What's interesting about this is by telling everyone this is how long I'm going to talk, those clients, especially if you think about battery powered devices that don't need to listen to this conversation because it's encrypted, they can't hear the majority of it anyways, they can only hear the controlled traffic. And it's not intended for them, they can actually go into low power mode. They can go to sleep. They can sleep their radio for this amount of time. And then once that time is finished, they'll turn the radio back on and listen if they need to transmit. And so they'll kind of use that. So it's kind of an interesting conversation dynamic that takes place here. But like I said, I'm about to hit go on here. And what you'll see is a light up here on channel 52, and then you'll see 56 through 64 light up. And this, it actually displays, not dwell time, it displays, wow, I just completely lost that term. Duty cycle, gosh, it displays duty cycle by color. So the higher the duty cycle, the darker the color is, and you'll see that. So here we go. I'm going to hit it now. So see a whole lot of duty cycle. I'm getting right at about 500 megabits per second of actual TCP throughput, which is very good. And now the upload test, and I'm getting about 300 megabits per second of upload. And then you see it's finished, and so it goes right back down. And then you'll see how this there were a lot of clients that had to be quiet during that time. So now this kind of stays busy for just a little bit while it gets caught back up. So this is a type of thing that we look at. I'll show one other thing real quick. I know I'm running way long, but this is a remote for a drone. Uses 2.4 gigahertz. So we're going to kick over to 2.4, and I'm going to turn it on. And this will actually auto-identify it for me. But you'll actually see there it goes. So there you can actually see it's frequency hopping. This remote is hopping through the channels, and you can actually see the spectrum in use and kind of what it's doing in that process. So this is a good example of what we would be using this tool for to troubleshoot with. because oftentimes if we have a throughput problem, it may not be a problem with the wireless design. It might actually be an interference problem. So we regularly use a spectrum analysis for that. All right, and then one more thing, and I'll keep this one really short. Right here. So this is a tool called Etherscope. It's made by a company called NetAlly. They also have something called an AirCheck that does something very similar. This is a handheld tool. You'll notice this looks like an Android. It's just because I'm remotely accessing a handheld touchscreen device that allows us to kind of do some of that same stuff. Look at channel
Jonathan,
utilization.
We're still seeing the frequency.
Oh,
monitor.
sorry. Thank you. Where you at? Here we go. There we go. All right. So this kind of does the same thing, just not nearly as good. Let's be honest about it. But it's handheld. It's battery powered, and because it's an all-in-one unit, it's really useful for kind of looking at the general health of a network. So this is one example of that. Kind of we can kind of see the utilization. So if I go back to, I literally just set down my phone. Where did I put it at? Oh, there it is. Put black on black and it disappeared. So if I go back here and hit run again there, what we're going to see here is we're going to see once it updates, there we go. We see that utilization again, right? So not nearly as pretty, but it is useful. It does kind of tell us the basics of what we need. And then we may also look at things like, active channels that are in use and what they're in use by. We may look at specific SSIDs, which are specifically the wireless networks that are available. Things like, again, signal strength, how close is it? How good is that signal? We'll look at clients, specific clients, and maybe we can actually see what we're receiving that client from. So if this is my MacBook here that I'm using, I can see it is using that full 80 megahertz channel. These are the channels it's talking on. This is the access point it's talking to. This is the SSID. This is the security type. There's a lot of really interesting information that you can see. Even though this is fully encrypted, the actual all of the control traffic can't be encrypted. Everyone has to be able to understand it. So there's a whole lot you can actually see just from that control traffic. So that pretty much wraps it up. That's kind of regular wireless tools that we use. I will shut up and stop talking. Wow, I really went long. Sorry, Renee. If you guys have time and you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Does anybody have a question? Jim?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say thank you very much. I'd have sat here all night. I love hearing this, and it's I took this stuff about 100 years ago. Well, before it was really wireless, thick net, thin net, and just the very basics of Wi-Fi when it was just a gleam in somebody's eye. So this is all the more fascinating to me. Plus the problems that we routinely run into in our own homes. Like I had bought, at a suggestion of an IT professional, I bought one of these little hotspots because we only had DSL in the neighborhood and the DSL would crash regularly. So I bought one of these little portable things that was small enough to put in your shirt pocket. And it really worked pretty good until I started loading up devices. And, it's amazing how many devices you start to get even in your home. I think I was up to like 13 devices. Well, it crawled to a crash. It just slowed down to a nothing. Yeah. So, again, at someone's suggestion, I just hooked copper from it to a really nice wireless router and then turned off the 5 gigahertz access. And boy, what a difference that makes. So this is something we can all relate to. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
Well, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope it was a little useful.
Thank you.
More than a little.
Paul?
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron's applauding you.
Yeah. See that.
If nobody else has any questions, as much as I hate to, because I haven't seen him in person in a couple of years, we'll let Jonathan go. Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to, and I'll be happy to come back if there's something more specific you guys want to talk a little bit more about. I'd be happy to do that. And Aaron and Renee, maybe we can just do this, the three of us, and catch up. That would be a lot of fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And Paul, Jonathan rides motorcycles too. He keeps promising us he's going to ride over this way and hasn't yet. So
Yeah, I need to do that. Especially once it starts warming up, I'll need to make a trip down there now for sure.
No, let me know when you're coming.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll see you guys later, and hope you have a great Tuesday evening.
thank you. And we'll see about getting together on this thing for just a chat.
Sounds great. All right.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye, Didi.
And quickly, I hope y'all enjoyed that.
Oh, that was great. Are you kidding? It was wonderful. I could have sat here for the rest of the night listening to that. You know, it's kind of funny. That program that he used is so powerful. Now, I'm sure it's buku expensive, right? You know, for something that maps out coverage like that. But in our own little world, we have EasyNet, right? Is everybody familiar with EasyNet? Plotting antennas and stuff? And I wonder if that wouldn't be something interesting for a future presentation, is to strong arm somebody into presenting EasyNet, because you could store a lot of programs, so it's easy to show on an overhead, or even this. But I mean, personally, I kind of like to get together, you know, face to face, eyeball to eyeball. And so for the future, maybe we could have a presentation on EasyNet. I think that'd be a
You're
lot
in
of fun.
charge of the presentations, Jim, so I think you could probably make that happen.
I think we can make that happen.
Did you say EasyNet?
Neck, like, you know, your neck here.
Oh,
Right.
EasyNet.
Yeah, it's a computing engine, a network. Wait a minute, numerical engine computer or something like that. I don't know.
Unmute
Bob,
Bob.
what is it, Bob? You know.
Numerical electromagnetic code.
Wow, I never would have guessed that one.
It's a big program, and there are some there's some that you can pay a lot of money for, and there's actually some free versions of it, probably a little more limited than the whole 9 yards, but they're out there on the internet. There's EasyNet and NEC2 and 3, and
Yeah.
you just have to look. You have to look around. I myself have avoided looking at it.
Well, I bought EasyNet 6, and that is really, really a nice program. It's old now. They probably have something that supersedes it. And EasyNet, as Bob pointed out, is just one of many, like the NEC 2 engine and things like that, like he already said. Let me see what I could do, and maybe a couple months from now, we'll do something like that. That would be fun. If everybody wants it. I don't know. Maybe nobody's interested, but if they want it, sure.
Topology into account too for propagation prediction, or is it just a theoretical?
It's a relatively semi-theoretical, practical kind of radiation pattern. It doesn't talk about propagation from point A to point B, but what it does show is fields around your antenna. And so it will show you, well, it tells you a lot of numbers and a lot of things too. I mean, it'll tell you impedances and things like that. But the more impressive thing is the visual, and you can get 3D and 2D modeling of what your antenna is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely work that up for presentation.
That'd be great. I think that'd be fun.
Well, we had it's been a couple of years now. Oh, what's Brian's name out of Forsyth County? WC3. What is it, Bob? You know him too.
Say it again.
The other Brian.
Not Ryan, but Brian out of Forsyth County does the propagation prediction stuff. You know what I'm talking about?
It ain't ringing a bell right this second.
Okay, never mind then. Yeah, there's a guy that he used to, a few years ago. He did a few presentations for us, and one piece of it was the EasyNet thing about your antenna predictions. And then he also put it on top of like a vocap and then a topology engine. So basically, you could, put your antenna with your orientation at your house, and you could see exactly your chances of making contacts in whatever direction. So he did it for our house one time. We had like really great for a really great chance to contact Europe, but like zero chance to contact Asia because just the way the topology is around it. So,
I don't remember that presentation myself, but it sounds like Brian W3CP in Cumming.
Yes,
yes, that's him.
that's him. So we'll
Yeah,
have to get him back
he
sometime.
did analysis of me up here for 6 meters, you know, how high to put the antennas and stuff like that.
That was the surprising thing. Everybody thinks the higher the better, but there is kind of
Yeah,
a ceiling for that based on the topography around you. So he does that great work.
In my case, and also for when W4NH is up on our mountaintop in North Carolina, because it drops off real fast. I'm right on top of the hill, and so are they up. So are we when we're up there. And my 2 antennas at like 35 and 50 feet stacked are like optimum for both here and on the mountain, believe it or not. So, and so I don't usually ever think about putting those any higher.
I can't remember the specifics, but I remember him talking about maybe it was a dipole for 40 meters here. It had to be like 34.6 feet for optimal, whatever, blah, 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 you know, versus where we had it. So, you know, it's very specific. Let's see if we can get him on there. See if he still does those presentations, because those are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You talk about, you know, antenna analysis. That is just.
Right. Do you think he would give a presentation sometime in the future?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, we'll find him.
Oh, that would be great.
Let's get through
Okay.
some business real quick. Let's see. Treasurer's report, we have the same amount of money in the bank. Last meeting's minutes. Smiley, did you send those?
Yeah, they're at the bottom of
The email
thing
you
you
sent?
sent.
Okay, I'm sorry. If we have any corrections, we'll deal with it at the next meeting. Old business. Our meeting location time for March. Daylight savings time happens on the weekend before our regular meeting, so the clocks turn on the 14th, which means sunset is going to be at 7:44 p.m., which means we can go to the park and have enough light. So that is our plan right now, but if we do go to the park, if the weather cooperates, we'll want to start at 6:30 instead of 7, so I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. So we will meet in person, still ideally go ahead and mask up. But we'll be there outside and at 6:30. So Jim, whatever program you're working up for next month, outside it will be.
Okay, sure. Sounds good. Now it'll be the same gazebo that we were at last time.
Yes.
Outstanding.
Yep,
Okay.
the City Hall Park. And I've got reviving the UNG Radio Club on here. Benjamin, not to put you on the spot, are you one of those UNG students who's going to be active in that club?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Awesome. Glad you could join us. And we've told Billy, whatever we can do for y'all, let us know. Some of these guys are just wealths of information and are more than happy to help. If you've got equipment needs, reach out. We'll be more than happy to help with that.
Yeah, I've got a mobile unit in that Jeep. That's
Nice.
primarily what I use, but I'm working on getting my technician right now, so I'm just listening in on that. And then it's got some pre-programmed rugged rich radio channels that I use to communicate when I'm out there.
Very nice. We work with a Jeep group, GEARS, the Georgia Emergency Active Responders. And they train to take the Jeeps out on search and rescue, like up the log trails and things. And they help, like after these storms come through and knock the trees down, they help with that. And they're all in the nice 4x4 Jeeps. And we're getting most of them licensed as ham radio operators because
They're all licensed now.
I think they are licensed now because that's the best way to communicate out on some of these mountain trails.
It really is, especially with the power you can get compared to a CB out there with a mobile unit.
Yeah, and there's almost always somebody listening who actually knows what to do should you need help.
Yeah.
Billy, was there anything you wanted to add about the club this week? Or
No, Benjamin was one of the invitees that I sent the note out to. I told you, but I don't think I've told everybody else. we had like 160 students interested up front. A lot of them thought it was broadcast radio. And so I sent a clarification note out and then asked, for those that would tell me what campus they were on. So out of the 160 or so, I got 43 responses, which is still solid.
Very solid.
And out of those, there were 11 who already had a technician license. One was working on a general. There were 11 altogether that were either working on a license or had a license. One of them is a young lady who is a third generation ham operator.
Nice.
Which is kind of interesting. Can't wait to meet her. But yeah, I think it's coming together. I'm going to try to get some information to set up a meeting. Renee, I may ask you to help, come to that meeting, or a couple of the other folks, just to kind of answer questions, because I don't have my license yet, and I'm having fun learning about frequencies and electricity and circuits, and it's just a lot of fun. I hadn't worked that hard on stuff since I was in college. Yeah. But anyway,
It keeps your brain active, which I'm convinced.
Yeah, what little I got left. Anyway, and glad to see a bunch of old military guys in here as well. Yeah, because that's kind of my background.
Very good.
But that's it.
Excellent. So we'll get into the new business, which for the UNG club, as y'all get active, you're welcome to join us on any of this we're about to talk about, because these are events that are going to happen throughout the year. First one up is the death race. That is a 100-mile run through the trails from Vogel to Amicalola. Crazy ultra marathoner people. What we do is keep up with the runners as they come into each of the rest stations and send that on down the line, so they know who to keep looking for and which runners may have dropped out. And of course, if they need some kind of assistance, we would call that in as well, but that hardly ever happens on this race, thank goodness. The dates for that, March 27th and 28th. And right now, unlike last year where they did an out and back, they are planning on making the full run from Vogel to Amicalola. So we will actually be at the Jake Mountain Bull Mountain parking lot. So Smiley, right there in your backyard this year. But it is aid station 8, so our operating time frame is probably going to be set up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'll end up operating until about 2 o'clock in the morning as they come through. So any of you that would like to join us for that, please do. It is WinLink heavy. So if you're working on your WinLink skills and want to practice a little bit, this is a good way to do it, because the information that we're passing, yes, we need to get it down the line, but it's not like emergency critical most of the time. So it's a good way to practice.
So the death race, the communication for the death race is actually an Aries event, right? It's supposed to be a club event. It's actually a state Aries thing. So every rest stop is, the communicators there are all Aries groups, right? So Lumpkin County has been assigned to aid station 8 here, but another Aries group will be there. So this is not only a good way to practice doing digital remotely, we can do HF, we can do packet, WinLink out there. It's also a good way to get to know your other Aries groups, and to hear people, right, and get familiar with call signs. So, and if there is an emergency, you'll need to know who the next guy is, right? The people in the next county over. So it's a pretty good event here. Now it's a long one. Like Renee said, it's WinLink heavy. It's basically a well, Smiley saw it last year. Is basically runner number and then time in and time out. And you copy and paste it in to a WinLink message and send it to the group. And then everyone pastes it into their own spreadsheet so they have an updated copy. Works fairly well. You just have to beat the ever-loving crap out of it to get to work the first time. And then once you figure it out, it works fine. But it is, if you want some WinLink experience in the field, that's a good one to have. Now, last year we did this, and it was at, what was the place we had?
Winding Stair. It was up in Union County.
No, Winding Stair was where you were before, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where were we at before, Smiley, last year? I didn't hear you.
You're muted.
I don't even know what I had for breakfast this morning, man.
Okay, whatever. It was a very small. It was basically where a dirt road and the trail met, and that was pretty much it. Now, the parking lot here is actually pretty significant, and we'll need probably 4 or 5 or 6 operators there. Like we'll need a couple, because the where they come in is way down there. Where they go out, way over there. Where the aid station's here, so we'll need some support for this one. Anyway, I've talked too long, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah, so pop me an email if you can help. I will send out an email and a Facebook group notice about this in the next couple of days. So next, we're going to try and have a skills day in May. I'll have more about that at the meeting in March. Our potential location is Vinny's Shack. So if Vinny comes to the meeting in March, then we'll confirm that. Field day is June 26th and 27th. A couple of years ago, we actually did field day on the drill field at UNG. It worked out pretty well. We'd love to do it again, but we have to have a sponsor there who is attached to the campus. That was Justin previously. But skills day is 2 days of operating. You set up in the morning, start operating at 2 o'clock on Saturday and run to 2 o'clock on Sunday if you want to. Just trying to make as many connections, as many contacts as you can in that 24-hour period. And we typically talk to stations from Mexico to Canada and from the East Coast to the West Coast. So it's a lot of fun. It's a group event, and I think we will be able to do it as a group this year at the rate you guys are getting vaccinated. So we'll talk more about that again in March.
Renee, I don't think you're gonna have a problem finding somebody to help you with that on campus.
It really did work out well as a location. And then in September 26th this year, we have Six Gap, which is the 100-mile bike ride that starts at the high school, goes up almost to Brasstown Bald, and then comes back. That's a big event.
Big.
Benjamin, I would very much be interested in you helping us with that. We have, that is a bicycle race, and they do get injured and have to quit and have to be brought in. And I have a team of what we call support and gather SAG drivers who are in the Jeeps and go and pick up these riders that can't finish and bring them back in. So if you think you might be interested in doing that, we pay for your gas and buy you lunch. So
Yeah, what were the dates for that?
It's September 26th. It's the Sunday of the last full weekend in September.
And you get a t-shirt.
And you get a t-shirt.
Yeah, I'll definitely be up at the school for that, so I should be able to help.
Rick is modeling one of the
Rick's
t-shirts.
got one.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good ham radio practice, because that's the only way. Cell phones don't work in a lot of those places.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to hear how a true tactical emergency style net would work. And we do work actual emergencies. A lot of the time it's just the status of riders as they come around the course. But
Need more pickle juice.
and Coca-Cola. But we do typically get at least 2 broken collarbones a year and some pretty good road rash cases. So
Beware the bear.
There it goes.
yeah, and they've run into bears before.
Yeah. Had a bear around the woods that hit a rider. Explain that to the EMT.
With it
Wait
being
till your
first
insurance
year, I would
company
try
gets a
to-
hold of the report.
Since it would be your first year helping us, I would try not to send you on any serious emergencies, only like the mechanicals that can't finish, unless you are interested in the emergency aid side of
It's a
it.
long way from.
So
I'm down for whatever.
we've got a long time to talk about it before we get there. And the last bit of business for the meeting tonight is net control for next month. Jim did it last month. I had it 2 months prior, so we need somebody else to volunteer.
Don't everybody scream at once now.
Brad?
Oh.
Okay. You know, I've never, I usually am not around to check into that net, but yeah, I can do it.
Yay.
Thank you. That's why I'm making you do it, so you'll get back on our net.
Yeah, okay.
Excellent. Thank you. So Brad's net control for the next month. Just let me know if you can't cover it for some reason. We'll take care of it.
Okay, sure.
And that's everything I had on the agenda, unless anybody has any other new business.
There's a fellow behind you.
Not new business. I was late, so I apologize if you covered this, but the Aries HF net is going to be this week after the Thursday night net. So we're going to do about 39.75 hereabouts, up or down some amount of time. And Jim, did you have any interest in doing net control for that one?
Yeah, I could do it. You want to shoot me a script?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Shoot me a script and we'll see. And you want to do it right immediately? Let's say what, 8:30?
It's usually 8:30 or right after the net, whatever is later.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that works for me. I'll fire up the linear and we'll clear a channel.
all right. Yeah, so that's on 80 meters. And that we did that was that the first time we did it last month? That was actually pretty good.
Yeah, it worked really well.
Yeah, so we're going to do that again this Thursday. All right.
The bands are actually pretty good. At night, 80's been quiet lately, so it actually works pretty well. And don't blow off the idea of no sunspots. Last night I worked South Africa on 100 watts, and he sounded like he was in the same room with me.
Nice.
It's the storms that were coming in. It's interesting what happens when you have a storm like that behind you.
Well, yeah, on the low bands, those storms are just awful.
Yeah.
I had to use a loop antenna out in the woods to hear anything above the static crashes.
Yeah.
Very good. Does anybody else have any other new business? Then we will officially adjourn, so those who are tired of us can go on, and I'll leave the call open for a little while longer for anybody that just wants to chat. So thank you all. 7-3. Have a lovely week.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. 7-3.
Great meeting you all.
Nice to meet you, Benjamin. Glad you could join us.
Yeah,
Hey,
it was great. That
Benjamin,
was
join us more often.
yeah, if my schedule's free, you can get me on an email list or something. I'll try to get to the meetings.
Absolutely. Billy has my email, so you can get it from him or just have him pass yours on to me, whatever works.
Yeah, it sounds good. He's got my email, so.
We'll get you on the list.
There were two North Georgia cadet graduates here visiting me yesterday.
No.
Probably either 96 or 97 when they finished.
All over the
See, I
place.
still got.
And one of them's been a ham since before that, so.
Is it
Did
still true
you
that
tell
were
them old
doing-
Navy stories, Bob?
They didn't want to hear that. They've got more stories. They're younger guys. They've done a lot.
This is Benjamin. This is wooden ships and iron men.
I'm in the reserves. It hadn't changed much.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Jim.
All right.
Night.
Good night.
Mm.